right, people, I'm Dave Rubin. This is the Rubin Report, and using the latest internet technology, we are live streaming on YouTube, Rumble, and Locals, and it's Friday, which means it's time for a roundtable extravaganza, which generally would mean that I'd have two guests. But this guest, it has such a proven track record on this program, I said we can split him into two and just bring him on alone. I don't know that exactly makes sense, but it sounded right when I was thinking about it right before we started the show. You know who he is. He needs no introduction. The host of Ask Dr. Drew, Dr. Drew Pinsky from Los Angeles, California. How are you, my friend?
Great, Dave. Good to see you. But the way you framed that, this can't go well. This can't. This guy has to disappoint. But here we go. Let's do it.
Well, actually, the reason I wanted to have you, we normally do the roundtables on Friday, but I thought we would just do this with you today because the whole show today really is just like a health update. You know, there's so much between Biden's cognitive stuff, the cancer stuff. There's a lot going on in the Maha world and a bunch more. I thought that you could probably handle the heavy load that normally two guests would handle. And also you have a certain, not only medical expertise, but also some personal expertise as it comes to the prostate cancer stuff, which we'll get into. So let's just dive right in.
He left him out. A domestic terrorist.
Oh, and well, yes, we will get. You also are a domestic terrorist, which I think I am too. We're still trying to go through the paperwork that just came out. Yes, the government apparently was calling a bunch of us who are anti-mandate, not just anti-vax or whatever you want to call that, but anti-mandate.
Yeah.
Yes, that we are somehow domestic terrorists. So we will get to. So yes, everything being equal, I should have prefaced that properly.
Thank you.
A possible domestic terrorist and also a doctor, Drew Pinsky.
Thank you, sir.
There you go. And also from LA, which is pretty questionable in and of itself. All right. Let's dive in. And I referenced you a couple times on the show this week because I was watching your show and I saw you on Dana Loesch's show explaining a bit of not only your history with prostate cancer, but some of the research that you've done and when tests are done and all of this stuff. So we'll clean up some of this. Here's video from CNN. Biden's team saying that the last time he was tested for prostate cancer, believe it or not, was 2014.
A Biden spokesperson tells me that former President Joe Biden, his last known PSA, which is a screening that could be used for prostate cancer, was conducted in 2014, and that he was never diagnosed with cancer before the Friday diagnosis that was handed from his doctors. Now, to give you a bit of a background, the PSA test checks the blood for levels of a protein called prostate-specific antigen that might indicate the presence of prostate cancer. Many medical associations say that whether to have this test is something that's usually determined between a patient and their doctor, and independent experts who have reviewed some screening studies for the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommend against screening for prostate cancer for men 70 and older. So in 2014, Biden would have been in that 71, 72 age range. Now, this new disclosure from Biden's spokesperson comes as President Donald Trump and some of his allies have questioned why Biden's cancer diagnosis was not revealed earlier.
Okay, Drew, so I want you to clean up a bunch here because we basically find out that he has what I guess they would call late stage prostate cancer, Gleason score 9. It has moved to his bones. And that generally speaking, as I understand it, but clean this up if I'm wrong, generally speaking, you would know about this for years. This is not something that magically appears just like that. The argument, I suppose, that the administration or the Biden officials or doctor or team around him is making is that if you're over 70, that perhaps you don't do this yearly test that virtually everyone over about 45 or so should be doing. So I'm trying to give them every benefit of the doubt here, but now I will hand it to the professional.
Giving them every benefit of the doubt, there is some controversy on this. However, experts in prostate cancer, people I'm around all the time, are very clear the screening should continue. And the proof, everybody, is in the pudding. Look at how this played out. It didn't have to happen like this. If he had been properly screened, if indeed, and by the way, this falls into what Adam Carolla always calls stupid or liar.
Right.
And are you stupid and not doing the screening in this man who's, by the way, deteriorating? If an old man is deteriorating, you look for an explanation for that. The cancer itself could be the explanation for the deterioration over the last 2 years. people with Parkinsonism, people with dementias of various types, even minimal cognitive change, get worse when they have any medical problems. So it's all under the category of stupid or liar. And the reality is, because we have no confidence in what comes out of that group, the Biden administration, that we immediately assume it's lying or obfuscating or distorting, or somehow we're not getting the whole story, because it doesn't make sense that the president of the United States wouldn't be screened at the highest level of what's available for any individual. And the fact that he carted around this osteopath with him to run, I guess, cover for him for his medical problems. I don't know why that guy was there. He apparently got in between the president and the Walter Reed physicians, clearly, because had it been up to the highest standards, he would have been screened regularly. This would have been picked up early. There would have been no problem with it.
So I love that you just referenced Adam's stupid or liar thing, because I think that perfectly frames what's going on here, because either it was a bunch of people that did not know what they were doing, and I think we could say that relative to the entire administration, not just this specifically, or they've been lying about it. But just to try to really give the devil his due here, can you explain why is it that a doctor would say, hey, at 70 now, we should not test for this? Just if we're just really trying to play this out in the most clear way possible.
So although the U.S. Preventative Task Force has not caught up with this yet, if you actually are talking to experts, they would continue to screen for this. The thinking the last time that they evaluated this was, by over-screening, men are getting treatments they don't need that haven't been shown to actually improve longevity. That is not the current available wisdom. That was then, and I understand that for a while their concerns were, you're giving radiation, you're having fancy surgeries, you're having all these treatments, and we haven't really proven yet that we're extending life by doing so. Now I would argue we have that data, but the task force hasn't caught up with it.
So what do you think, again, you're not his doctor, so I'm just asking you in the broad sense, what do you think, if we are to believe that his doctor decided not to test him for the past 10 years, and then you see the note that comes out a few days ago that it's Gleason score 9, metastasized to the bone. I think I heard you talk about this with Dana, but it almost is impossible that it could have spread in basically the 100 days post-presidency, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's impossible. And the fact that he said they found a nodule suggests they were doing digital rectal exams on the poor guy. We don't really do that anymore. We follow the PSAs. And so that's why this notion of, hey, we found a nodule, it's metastatic disease, that doesn't happen in sophisticated medical practice. Yes, you can present, about 2% of prostate cancers will present with advanced disease at the time in which the PSA elevates. But that isn't the president of the United States. That's right. That's somebody who's, maybe getting good care, but not maybe substandard care. We see that kind of thing. But somebody for whom everyone is on top of the patient, that really shouldn't happen.
You also just referenced the cognitive stuff. So if you were the president's doctor, or you were the doctor of a 80-some-odd-year-old man that clearly was having some cognitive stuff, and that, let's say, had a roughly important job, just wasn't heading out to pasture, clearly you would have been doing this test, but do you think that the cognitive stuff would have given you, I think this is what you just implied basically, the cognitive stuff would have given you just like a little extra feather in the cap to say we should look at some other stuff too, because it doesn't necessarily mean Parkinson's or something else?
Right. So when an elderly patient comes in and complains of extreme fatigue or depression or sleep disturbances, or the family brings them in saying, hey, they lost a step here, they seem to be forgetting things, if you're really working for the president of the United States, you're going to do an extensive screen for some underlying medical problem triggering that decline, and or some primary illness that is afoot that you weren't aware of, perhaps. So all of that has been obfuscated. We don't know what was going on. Or again, stupid or liar, could have been substandard care at the time. But something sort of rang in my head this morning when I woke up, which was this notion that the legacy media was, you aren't a doctor, you aren't an expert, you can't. Well, when doctors did ring in, they of course attacked us. We were domestic terrorists, don't forget. But the fact of the matter is, when patients develop cognitive decline, it is the family and friends that bring them in, because you can't tell. You exactly can tell when there's a problem, and then we render a diagnosis for why that's happening. But it's apparent to lay people when somebody has a cognitive decline.
Right. Well, also, I was thinking this. It's funny you mentioned you woke up with something in your head this morning. I was the first thing that I thought of this morning because I knew we were covering this today was like, well, wait a minute. So now we have definitive evidence that he does have prostate cancer, which no one suspected really. There was no reason to suspect prostate cancer, but we still don't have any definitive idea of what happened cognitively.
Correct.
You're saying it might be connected to this, but they still haven't released that. So there's still, it's like we have one at least semi-scandal here, again, stupid or liar scandal, but then there's a whole other one. But look, you know what, before I get to the next clip, can you just mention a little bit of your story around some of this? Because this is very personal to you, obviously.
Yeah, well, I just want to finish what you were bringing up here, though, about what might be going on. There's a lot more to be told. I mean, it gets a little complicated because he was on a medication to suppress, he did have prostate symptoms, and he was on a medicine to suppress prostatic hypertrophy, which can alter the PSA, which is, by the way, why you look at the PSA even more with greater scrutiny, which they did not. But there's a lot of stuff going on here. But the big thing here, Dave, is that they claim he refused the cognitive testing and the cognitive inventories. I'm here to tell you, I think somebody who's the president of the United States ought to take the Montreal inventory that Mr. Trump takes every year publicly and just go, here's the score, here it is. It takes a while to fill out that test. It's not a mini mental status exam. It's a formal cognitive assessment. And President Biden never had that. And I bet you they're going to hide behind that as the reason, oh, we didn't know what was going on. So let me tell you my personal story.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed at age 50 with prostate cancer. There's a whole story there. I was I was not a good patient. I was very resistant. I thought, yeah, I'll come back. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. I had some very fine people with great judgment going, we got to look a little further, because my PSA went from 1 to 4. It was still normal. Yeah.
Did you have any symptoms, or you were just going for an annual test?
Routine. And my dad had prostate cancer. My uncle had prostate cancer. And so I figured I'd get it in my 70s. But at 50, I was really angry about it. But then I needed a prostatectomy, because that's what we do with young men with prostate cancer that's localized. It evidently got outside the capsule locally a little bit. I ended up having something called SBRT radiation about 3 years ago at UCLA, which is an amazing advancement in the radiation therapies for prostate cancer of all type, and probably many other tumors soon. And it's been fine. And I followed carefully, and I'm at UCLA, and that's that. This is, it's not fun, but if you're going to get a cancer, prostate cancer is the one you want. And lo and behold, by the way, it's one of the most common cancers on earth. And yet people are aware of breast cancer. Nobody's aware of prostate cancer.
Right.
And one quick thing, black men in particular, we do a terrible time screening them, and they usually present with more advanced disease and higher grade disease. And we've got to get on that. And by the way, if the Biden family administration was so concerned with African-American citizens, that should have been their message out of this experience. Black men particularly were doing poorly. Get your screening.
Do you think there's also there's like a stigma because of the way they had to do the test that you mentioned a moment ago, like literally digitally, versus now a blood test? It's like,
yeah. It still exists that people are, nobody's going to put, doctor, you're not going to put my finger there, blah, blah, blah. But
at least take the guy out for a drink. You know what I'm saying?
So it's more so.
I stole that from Richard Lewis, 1982. Go.
I'm glad that was somebody else's joke. But I think there's another layer to it, which is men are fearful they're going to lose their erectile function, they're going to have urinary problems, which indeed can happen with prostate treatment, but it's not common. We do such a good job with this now. I have 0 symptoms, complete, perfect, and I had a giant surgery to take out that whole organ was removed. My prostate was removed, and I was back at work in a week. I had no urinary symptoms, no erectile dysfunction, nothing like that. So please, gentlemen, look at what happened to President Biden if you don't do the proper screening.
Can we put under Dr. Drew's name not on Blue Chew? Can we just get that up real? We can't do that on the fly. But I saw what you were doing there, and we're very proud of you. And I can hear Susan in the back. She's smiling right now. It's very exciting. Well, we might actually get some answers here as to whether this was stupid or a liar, because check this out from the leading report breaking. Biden's longtime physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, has been called to testify regarding an alleged cover-up of the former president's cognitive decline, which may have led to the potentially unauthorized use of AutoPen to sign the executive action. So look, Drew, my audience, and I say this all the time, I am not that hopeful that anyone ever gets pinned against a wall, right? Like Fauci is still out there getting his $400,000 a year for the rest of his life. All of the people who do the bad things seem to skate away if they do it for the government. This one seems like someone might pay the price because, and maybe it is the doctor, because it's so profoundly scandalous and it's connected directly to health. And so that means it's not just like a government scandal. There are ethics scandals and medical scandals and all sorts of other things. Do you have any hope we'll uncover something here?
Well, they have their fall guy. We will learn something, and we will certainly be able to kind of ascertain stupid, liar, both. We will get that sense. Whether or not we'll come away with a real understanding of what's going on here, I'm not that hopeful. Generally, I don't like the saber rattling for civil and criminal action against all the excesses of COVID and the administration and whatnot, because I feel like as we move down that path, people get fancy attorneys, people get
defensive. I
defensive.
agree.
We never get the truth. We must get to the truth so that this never freaking happens again.
All right, last part on this. If you were Biden's doctor now, he obviously has access to every possible treatment in the world. You and I were talking offline right before we started that our friend Scott Adams also announced just the same day, I guess he found it was the opportune time to mention that he has a very similar cancer, thinks he only has a few months to live. President Trump called him. He will also have access to every experimental medication out there. I mean, do you see a kind of window? Again, I know you're not either one of their doctors, but do you see a kind of window here for people that have this late stage version of prostate cancer?
Oh, absolutely. We have a lot of things we can do. We can slow it down. And there's even radio labeled PSMA, it's called, where you can actually, much the way the PSA you've now heard about is a protein on the surface of the prostate cancer cells. PSMA is even more specific, and we can direct specific radio labeled isotope to each individual cell and wipe it all out. The traditional therapy is androgen deprivation therapy, which is, we use actually castrate men with this, and that slows things down. Obviously, lots of problems, side effect associated with that. Number one, by the way, is cognitive slowing and muscle wasting and falling, all the things that President Biden manifested, which made me think maybe he'd been on treatment for a couple of years. I still have a question about that. And then there are fancier treatments, enzalutamide, these sorts of medications that are out there. And then finally, as I said, they're radio labeled. And that's not a cure, but they're finding ways to use that create some longer term sort of slowing of the tumor. So eventually the elderly men die of something else sometimes before the cancer actually takes them. So there's a lot to be done, but men don't like the side effects from these medications, and I don't blame them.
All right, well, since Dr. Drew ain't got no problems down there, we are going to forego our Blue Chew ad today and go to Fast Growing Trees, and then we'll have more on the other side. Spring is here, and if you've been thinking about transforming the yard, now's the time to do it. So let me tell you about Fast Growing Trees. They're the largest online nursery in the United States with over 2 million happy customers. What makes Fast Growing Trees stand out is how easy they make the whole process. Whether you have a big backyard, a tiny patch of land, or even no yard at all, they've got something for you. They have over 6,000 options, all backed by their Alive and Thrive guarantee, so your plants arrive happy, healthy, and ready to grow. And if you're like me and don't exactly have a green thumb, don't worry. They've got plant experts on call to walk you through the whole process. Right now, they've got a huge spring deal, up to half off select plants. And as a listener, you get an extra 15% off your first purchase when you use the code Rubin at checkout. That's fastgrowingtrees.com, code Rubin. Now's the perfect time to plant. Don't wait until it's too hot or too late. Go save today. All right, let's continue with the health theme right now. Drew, I know you're going to love this story. Listen to this from CBS. The White House Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA Commission, led by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has published its first report on what it says are 4 leading drivers of childhood chronic disease. What does the MAHA report say is causing childhood chronic disease? Poor diet, driven primarily by ultra-processed foods, cumulative exposure to chemicals like food additives and pesticide, lack of physical activity and chronic stress, over-medicalization with too many prescriptions and vaccines. I mean, this, I'm really just handing you Dr. Drew 101 here. I mean, I know none of that is going to surprise you, but you must be elated that we are talking about these things.
I'm delighted. I'm delighted. Also, they were talking in the presentation at the MAHA group, the notion that they're going to reduce drug prices. I don't know if you're going to get into that at all, but that was a really interesting conversation too. They are going to do that. But as it pertains to childhood illness, there's one sort of, you see the obvious things that I think we all know are contributing to the at least something like 60% of kids have at least one chronic illness. That is anathema. That is not
that's
okay.
insane.
We have to do something about that. But you see in there the over-medicalization and the chronic stress. The code for those two things are mental health problems. We are going to have to what's going to be uncovered as they begin to look for solutions for all of this. They're going to have to deal with health of our families, health of our child rearing, the mental health consequences of what we did during COVID. All of that is certainly contributing to the other chronic illness. And as it pertains to over-medicalization, that I absolutely agree with. Between 1987 2014, there's a 1,400% in prescribing to kids, and it's continued to grow from there. And the fact is, we have begun, embedded in this also is some other notion, which is that we are not supposed to experience any discomfort. Life is supposed to be always happy. And that also is anathema. The fact is, the way we build self-efficacy and resiliency and meaning is through engagement, through leaning in, through ordinary misery. I think you and I have talked about this before. Ordinary misery is good, and it doesn't require a medication. The notion that we send kids into safe spaces, disgusting. Lean in. That's how you get resiliency and self-efficacy.
Yeah, I was a camp counselor for a couple of years at sleepaway and at day camp, and I remember there would always be a few parents every summer that would have their kids on all of these medications throughout the year, and then would give them like a little vacation from it during the summer, and then the kids would be what the parents thought would be going crazy at camp, and I was always like, I was only 18 years old or something, but I was like, these kids just have energy. That's it. They have more energy and they're active and they want to run around and do all these crazy things because they're young humans.
Two things. We have pathologized the male because you just described a young male there. That's all we do, run around like that. And the other thing as it pertains to all the overprescribing for ADHD, one of the dirty little secrets on ADHD is childhood trauma also causes ADHD. And I'm here to posit that it's the predominant contributor in that diagnostic category.
Right, which then probably opens up a giant can of worms because parents don't want to think about whatever it might be, too much fighting in the household or God knows what that's leading to that. Be
divorce. We've depathologized divorce. Divorce is an adverse childhood experience. And a parent with a substance problem is an adverse childhood experience. Things that we just go, no big deal. It is a big deal in childhood, and we have to address that.
Right, you have two parents, one of whom might be on drugs or an alcoholic, they're fighting, they get divorced, and then you wonder why the 5-year-old's going crazy. Let me jump back to the first one for a second, because one of the things that I'm most amazed by in the 3 months of this administration is how quickly they've moved on the food stuff and how the conversation around MAHA has shifted things. When it comes to over-processed foods and all of these things, the seed oil, there's like a joke around seed oils with Bobby always, seed oils are gonna kill you. I went into my local grocery store last week, and I just out of sheer curiosity, I was looking at the salad dressings because I saw something on Instagram. I saw this thing on Instagram about how they make Hidden Valley Ranch salad dressing, and that it's basically, I'm not giving the exact numbers here, but they show it, and it's like 70% canola oil, which is highly processed, blah, blah. Anyway, I started looking at pretty much all of the salad dressings that we all know. And virtually every single one, except for Bragg's, which is what I ended up buying, it has either canola oil or vegetable oil or all of these processed oils. And then you can get a few that have olive oil or avocado oil. Were you thinking about this a couple of years ago? Like when you started seeing all of the health stuff and everything that you referenced, like Bobby's really brought it to the forefront, but we should have realized this, right?
Oh, yes. There's a woman named Kate Shanahan who was actually the doctor for the Lakers for a while. She's written a book called Deep Nutrition, and she was a biochemist. She was a PhD in biochemistry before she became a family practitioner. And when I first met her probably 10 years ago, I thought, oh man, this woman knows what she's talking about. And she alerted me to the seed oil story. And I started looking at things back then. Here are two things and she, by the way, felt that a lot of the excess cytokine reaction associated with COVID had its source in seed oil deposition in our fat tissue. I don't have an opinion about that, but she was very adamant that this is having pervasive effects on our health. I'll tell you one thing we know for sure. Seed oils in a fryer, heated seed oils, carcinogenic. We know that. Seed oils adversely affect inflammatory state of our body. We know that. Seed oils are in everything. Look, do you remember when you were growing up? Margarine was the great advance of no butter. Margarine. That's stuff. It's oil. Butter, tallow, olive oil. That's it. That's what you should just reach for every single time. And if you are not accustomed to reading labels, just it's oil and vinegar, which is what I've gone to these days for salad dressings.
Yeah. A little balsamic too. You're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine. Well, let's throw to this because this is like Dr. Drew 101 stuff. This is Dr. James Thorpe testifying, saying that the COVID vax, I mean, this is unbelievable. I can't believe we're still getting through this stuff. Saying that the COVID vax mirrored the effects of abortion drugs on women.
This deception was institutionalized in the now infamous Shimabukuro study published on April 21st, 2021 in the digital version of the New England Journal of Medicine. 21 authors claimed the miscarriage rate was 12.6%, but the raw data revealed an 82% miscarriage rate in women vaccinated during the first trimester. This figure mirrors the effects of chemical abortion drugs such as RU486.
Yep.
I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised by anything at this point. Does this shock you? Or?
Jim is one of the few thousand high-risk obstetricians in our country. He has been ringing this bell for quite some time. He is seeing it in his practice, and that's just undeniable. He's just seeing it as it was, which is by the way, what I'm enjoying more than anything else is I think we should call this like the Dave Rubin experience or something.
the slow red pilling, yes.
It's not even red pilling. It's like a conversion experience. I think Jake Tapper is underway right now with this.
Yeah. Give Jake another like 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to go full red pill, but you have to convert your point of view. And he was, extremely passionate about getting people vaccinated, started seeing things in his clinical practice, and now you see he's testifying before Congress. He and I actually co-authored a paper on some of the VAERS data that's out there, and it's almost impossible to get it published. There's still a bias against it. And I understand people are afraid because guess what? As soon as you it's clear to us, it's now established that prior to this current administration, the previous administration would label you a domestic terrorist if you dared to publish anything that called into question the efficacy or safety of a vaccine.
Well, we're going to get to that in just a second because there's some breaking news you're looking at 2 domestic terrorists right now if you're watching this. But Drew, you're going to love this. I don't know if you heard, but about 3 months ago, basically, end of February, I crushed my knee playing basketball. I heard every pop and tear, and it was like glass and popcorn, and it turned out that I had 15 tears in my knee, meniscus and ACL, MCL, the whole thing. And I got stem cells, and I did adipose stem cells. So it was from my own fat, not from placentas or anything. But when I was speaking to a couple of the stem cell doctors, several of them, and part of the reason I ended up using my own fat, were saying that you don't want stem cells from vaxxed placentas.
Oh, yeah.
And so it has literally leaked into everything. Meanwhile, 6 weeks, I did the stem cells on April 10th. And I'm already playing 5-on-5 again, which is absolutely incredible. That's a little bit of a sidebar, but let's get to the domestic terror stuff. This is from Dr. Drew this morning. Public new Biden administration labeled opponents of COVID mandates as domestic violent extremists, newly released documents show. And this is what you tweeted. Wow, that's a professional milestone, which I did not know I had achieved nor intend, but it explains a lot. I mean, Drew, I know for a fact, Jim Jordan has shown it in congressional documents. I was banned from Twitter in July of 21 for saying that the vaccines were not working as promised and mandates were coming. They colluded with big tech. But congratulations, my friend. We are both domestic terrorists. I kind of always had a feeling about you.
You had I know. I tried to hide it, but it was hard to hide. But I always wanted to join you in something intimate. Here we are. We're domestic terrorists together.
We did it. 2 casual, well-dressed guys, nice haircuts.
Yeah, when I think about
what it used to be.
The mandate, though, is the most egregious part of the COVID story. That, you know, I don't know if you heard the myocarditis part of that hearing that you just show, where Dr. Thorpe was testifying about the effect on pregnant women, was also about myocarditis. And Ron Johnson presented the data on that from FOIA documents that shows the systematic suppression of the uncovering of the severe incidence of a life-threatening illness in young men. Yep. I've said since the beginning, there will be, and by the way, what did happen to Lamar Odom? Did he, not Odom,
right.
What was his, did he myocarditis in that?
Yeah.
We need to revisit that, because when he was asked some pointed questions, like, oh, I'm not going to talk about that. I think somebody got to him. I think if that was commotio cordis, it was commotio cordis and myocarditis, or post-myocarditis, because guess what? Ron Johnson uncovered that there were explicit recommendations for no physical activity after having had anything that was a hint of myocarditis, and they suppressed even that. So that is what led to a lot of the deaths that occurred, for sure. And people need to be held accountable. And I would argue that any institution that required a young man with that data out there, we knew about it. We were talking about it back then. Since the Israeli study first raised the flag, we started talking about it. That's when we became domestic terrorists, by the way.
Yeah.
But that any institution that mandated it should be sued. Absolutely. Should be sued for wrongful death. It should be sued for whatever the consequences were. They were out of line. Aaron Kheriaty raised the flag on this early and said, we don't have the data for a mandate. There's not an ethical ground for a mandate. We don't have it. And he was fired from his position as, guess what? The chairman of the bioethics department at University of California, Irvine, where he had always championed walking the walk when it gets tough. Not just talking the talk, but make sure you walk the walk when you see an ethical transgression. He was fired for it, and he was a lead plaintiff in the Missouri versus Biden case.
I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but when you see Dr. Marty Makary and Jay Bhattacharya and Bobby Kennedy up there, in front of the mics, you must feel like this was the only way out of this. Like there literally probably was no way out other than it might be actually these three guys. Maybe it could have been you.
What does Scott Adam call it? Like we're in a video game or something. He calls it he has a name for it, but
the simulation. The simulation.
It's proof of the simulation to me. When Jay told me he told me he was being considered for NIH, I swear to you, it took my breath away. I thought, this is Shakespearean. This is justice. Now, I want you to know, though, that both Jay and Marty and also Mehmet Oz were threatened with their job.
Yeah, of course.
Did you see the presentation yesterday on Maha with President Trump in the middle of the group, where he threatened all three of them and said, hey, if you don't get this done in 4 months, I'm firing all of you. I said, no, please get it done. I want you guys to stay in there. That is getting, what he was talking about was getting drug prices to the lowest available cost of any country in the world, that we should be paying the lowest. That I didn't realize we had been subsidizing other countries' drug expenses and research, and that has to stop. It's the same thing as tariffs, the same problem.
Imagine a government employee getting fired for not doing something that they were brought in to do. Trump truly is a radical. It's really rather extraordinary. We're going to shift gears and talk about this horrific shooting in D.C. and some of the fallout from that in just a second. But first, Morgan & Morgan. If you've been seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you should know exactly what your rights are. That's why I want to tell you about Morgan & Morgan. They're America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states. Unlike a lot of firms that settle quickly, Morgan & Morgan doesn't take lowball offers from private insurance companies. Just in the past few months, they won $12 million in Florida when the insurance company offered only $350,000. And in New York, they secured $6.8 million on a case where the offer was just $275K. And the best part, it's absolutely free unless you win. Insurance companies try to pay out as little as possible. Morgan & Morgan fights to get you more. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case, and you can do it right from your phone. It's that easy. All right, so there was obviously this horrific shooting outside the Jewish Museum in D.C. a couple days ago.
Before you switch gears, let's get Morgan & Morgan into the vaccine business of vaccine injuries. They should be. It's time.
For real, that could be a commercial for them right there. But all right, so let's get everybody caught up on the shooting, and then some of the fallout and reaction has just been beyond imagination. This is from ABC News. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram, two staff members at the Israeli embassy, were killed outside an event at the Capital Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night, according to Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar. The young couple were not diplomats, but instead Lashinsky was a researcher in the political department of the Israeli embassy, and Milgram organized U.S. missions to Israel. The couple that was gunned down tonight were about to be engaged. Yechiel Leiter, Israeli ambassador to the United States, said during the press conference, the young man purchased a ring this week with the intention of proposing next week in Jerusalem. It appears that he actually was Christian. Not that that even matters, but I think it adds a little extra context to all of this. And Drew, before I have you chime in, let's just get a little more on the shooter himself. This is from my friend Ari Hoffman. New Elias Rodriguez, the 30-year-old suspect in the shooting tonight in D.C. of two staff members of the Israeli embassy, is allegedly an active member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, who marched with BLM, the People's Congress of Resistance, and Answer Chicago. Drew, they've been saying globalize the Intifada. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure this is exactly what it means.
Yeah, if they hadn't been so explicit and so explicit to our young people, you might doubt it. And throughout my life, I would look at behavior like this and go, oh, when there are excesses in the media, the sort of most vulnerable amongst us are taken advantage of because they are swept into their delusions, and they might, have otherwise just been harmlessly not well. I don't think that about this case. I feel like we moved into new territory here that you're sort of tilting at, which is there is such a thing as political violent extremism, and we must put it up. This is a death penalty for this guy. Did you hear the way he leaned in and shot and shot and shot to make sure they were dead?
So after he hit her, she was then crawling away, and he went back for it. Yeah, and then once he was arrested, he was still yelling, "Free, free Palestine." I mean, there's no contrition or...
I don't care what the cause. There have been political moments like this before. Swift and sure justice. That's it. Look, it's not different than McVeigh and the things that happened back 30 years ago. It has to be swift and sure, or it will continue.
So where do you think we're at with the sort of mental and political and media moment with this? Because we've talked about sort of the mental stuff that our young people are going through and the social anxiety and everything else. Then a media that has lied to them about so many things, including, I would say, largely the Middle East and everything else. And then a political situation right now that feels very crazy, that young people are basically being brainwashed. Like, he's obviously not the only one. And we're going to get to some of the people excusing this violence. But we just have no idea how many people have now been so brain broken that they would be willing to kill about a conflict happening halfway across the world, of which likely they know very little, or probably the reverse of the truth.
That's right. So we are going to have to navigate this difficult course between free speech and our categorical desire for free speech and speech that is harmful and dangerous. It's hard. That is a hard navigation. I'm sort of a free speech literalist. I think that absolute free speech is necessary. But when that free speech leads to calls for violence and that violence that ensues, there's got to be a reaction to that. That's no longer about the free speech. That is about inciting riot. That's about inciting violence. That's something different. And there is such a thing as treason. And you can express, because you have free speech, we can see the treason in the light of day. That's why I think free speech needs to be protected in absolute cases. And you can it is okay to take action for speech that results in horror.
Right. That's the important distinction that I've been trying to make with people. Of course, you and we've been on the front of the free speech thing forever. What you cannot do as it pertains to free speech is gin up a group of people and say, go kill them. So when they say things like globalize the Intifada, they're purposely trying to have it both ways. It's just an amorphous phrase and whatever. But if you ask people, I don't know, the hundreds and thousands of people who have died in suicide bombings and stabbings and everything. And by the way, it's not just in Israel, it's in London and it's in France and elsewhere. If you ask them what intifada means, so they're trying to use our freedoms against us. And that's the part where those of us that are thoughtful and really trying to solve some of the problems are going to have to think about this. We're not trying to silence people, but if you're telling a whole group of people, globalize the intifada, wink, wink, then these things happen. This was an incredible, and this proves your point right here. Check out this headline yesterday from the New York Times about what happened. This is the New York Times, and then I'm going to read an old tweet by a legendary comedian who unfortunately is no longer with us, Norm Macdonald. This is the New York Times yesterday. Pro-Palestinian movement faces an uncertain path after embassy attack. The slaying of 2 Israeli embassy workers cast a harsh spotlight on pro-Palestinian groups in the United States. Activists who were already being scrutinized could face further pushback. Oh no, an activist who killed somebody and a group of people calling to globalize the intifada. And listen to this classic Norm Macdonald line from 2016. What terrifies me is if ISIS were to detonate a nuclear device and kill 50 million Americans. Imagine the backlash against peaceful Muslims. I mean, it's the perfect blend of these two ideas, really. Like, how about we have sympathy for the victims and we look at why the people are doing it rather than go, oh no, the people who just are in cahoots, the people who just committed this atrocity, we should be sympathetic to the people they're in cahoots with.
Yeah, for some reason, what's ringing in my head is when we had that horrible shooting here in San Bernardino, and the then Attorney General under the the last closing hours of the Obama administration got up to address this, and she goes, first and foremost, I don't want to hear one thing about extremism or about what motivated this shooting. You remember that?
Yep.
That was a breathtaking moment. And you can't have a society that only focuses on the well-being of the perpetrators and doesn't take into account the rest of us. Right. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this area. I don't know how we navigate out of this, but I do feel like media is duplicitous. That, one of the reasons that Elon Musk left Washington, he was sort of asked by a reporter or somebody he was interviewing with a couple of days ago. He said, what did you learn in Washington? He goes, I learned how effective media propaganda is. And the guy's like, oh, come on. Like what? He goes, like I'm a Nazi. Like I'm a Nazi. People think I'm a Nazi because of a random hand gesture. That was propaganda and was effective. And that is disgusting. And that we have to solve that problem because we give them the public airways and they have to manage them responsibly in such a way that the rest of us are not harmed by what they do.
And by the way, we know damn well that if a Jewish person, or certainly an Israeli, had shot 2 pro-Palestinian activists outside of an embassy or a museum in DC, the headline in the New York Times would say, Israel now has to grip with an ever escalating violence that they have started, or something to that effect. And just to be completely clear, if that had happened, I would absolutely condemn those people, of course, as I know you would, of course, Drew, too. And it only falls on the people who do this, who do the actions, and those who instigate them to do it. But now check this out, because there's another layer of problems here. It's not just the people that are committing these horrible things and calling for it. It's the layer of people that are softly, subtly injecting it into our society. This tweet is rather extraordinary. This is a tweet from University of Pennsylvania's Palestinian Literature Festival organizer. Her name is Susan Abdullawa. And this is unbelievable. Listen to this. Natural logic. When governments fail to hold Israel accountable for an actual Holocaust being committed before our very eyes, no genocidal Zionist should be safe anywhere in the world. What Mr. Rodriguez did should come as no surprise. In fact, I'm surprised it has not happened sooner. Human beings with a conscience literally cannot bear to witness such evil every day, out being inflicted upon the bodies, minds, and futures of an utterly defenseless people by such a hateful, racist colonial state. Okay, so I'm going to ignore the calls for the genocide, the Holocaust stuff. It's all bullshit. They're defending themselves. Release the fucking hostages, you actual genocidal maniacs. Let's put that aside for a second. But she basically said, go out there and kill. It's not that she's saying go out there and kill Jews. That's the obvious part. She's saying go out there and kill hundreds of millions of Christians that are Zionists. It just means that you believe that the Jews should have a tiny little state in the Middle East. There's, 40 some odd Arab Muslim nations. There's a lot of Christian nations. But she's saying kill people. This is someone at UPenn. What do we do? Defenders of free speech, what should be done? She's saying go kill these people.
Yeah, I think the market needs to handle a lot of this. And I think that's what the current administration is trying to do, is to withdraw artificial financial support from these institutions that breathe rarefied air and aren't under the influence of gravity. They live in a world that's not real, where they can say anything, do anything, and they still make their money, and they still have their freedoms to do whatever they want, say whatever they want. And there needs to be consequence for that. And that consequence easily should be market forces, and they can be brought to bear rather easily, and these people will not be maintained in their job. That's the way it goes. There will be consequences for this. And look, most people, I think most people are sort of, the way mass formation works, 20% of people get radicalized, 10% like you and me go, stop it, and then 70% don't care. Most people in this country are good people, and they don't care. They want to be protected, left alone. And we need to protect the vast majority of people in this country and not subject them to the radicals on any side.
Right, and it's just the use of language and the duplicitousness, genocidal Zionists. So if you said to this woman, okay, well, what if someone's just a Zionist, but they're not genocidal? She would say that doesn't exist. So the implication is, okay, well, Jerry Seinfeld believes that the state of Israel should exist. So should you go kill him? Dr. Drew Pinsky, Dave Rubin, plenty of Donald Trump. Should we kill Donald Trump? It's just unbelievably absurd.
Well, and if you want to Dave, that's what, when you call somebody Hitler enough times, then somebody's going to try to kill them, because you do anything to stop Hitler. That's the one thing that Jake Tapper said recently that I thought was, he is coming around, where he said, he goes, well, the entire Democratic Party, not me, of course, entire Democratic Party decided that Trump is Hitler, then you can justify anything. This is the same nasty logic that you're talking about here, where if this is what she is saying it is, you're entitled to do anything. We have to undo that delusional thinking. That is delusionality. We need to be back in reality here.
Drew, my whole freaking political evolution, everyone knows the story, but I remember being back on the Young Turks around 2014, 2015 and debating with them, because they believed, many of the hosts believed that political violence was okay, that you have to move things forward through violence. And once you say that's okay, so you can shoot an embassy worker, well, someone might want to shoot you for your beliefs. Once you open that Pandora's box, all bets are off. I want to show you one more clip on this, and it gets to the point of the ridiculous way the media covers this, that we should be concerned not about the victims, but about the people who are in cahoots with the murderer. This is CNN. I don't even know this host's name. She does not deserve this job. Take a look.
As you go forward with what you have seen, can you give us any sense, because you said you looked the shooter in the eyes, can you give us any sense of what you saw in him as he was sort of getting help and people were tending to him as if he too was a victim of seeing this?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I heard about that part because we were in a secure room when he initially walked in. I just saw him screaming and then being handcuffed. But what I saw in his eyes, I went to Columbia for grad school, and I saw the same thing in his eyes as I saw in the eyes of all the protesters at Columbia. Nothing different between him and them.
But they did not create this horrific shooting. They did not, they didn't shoot.
They gave permission. They gave the permission. And they've called for this. They have called for Intifada revolution, which is the same thing he yelled last night.
She almost had it right at the beginning, but they didn't create this, except they did. And Drew, I want to ask you a question about the eyes thing, because I've been to a lot of college events over the years, and I know what that look is. I actually know what it is. I have been to many events where I have had things thrown at me and fire alarms pulled and police escorts and all of those things. And there genuinely is a look in their eye like if they could kill you, they would. And now we have an example of it.
Yeah. So there's two things I would expect to see there. Could you see sort of the white above their iris? Like they're kind of like that?
Yes. Yes, there is. It is. I know this sounds cliche. It is almost demonic. They don't look like they're there. It looks like they're possessed.
Either mania, which a lot of these situations are hypomanic or mania, but narcissistic rage, full out narcissistic rage. That's what it is. It's been triggered. It has been cultivated. And again, the media is the one place we can go to sort of turn the heat down and not allow these people to keep dismissing it. And I would argue that to the extent that we have representatives, people in the government who are co-signing this in any way, treason is a real thing. We haven't talked enough about treason these days. And I would argue that it needs to be sort of brought back into the consciousness of people who are making the deliberative choices in this country.
Drew, did you see the clip? We don't have it for today, but we had it for yesterday. It's a 10-second clip of Ilhan Omar walking outside the Capitol being asked if she has a commentary on the shooting, and she refuses. All she had to do is, you can't shoot people. That's it. Oh, we do have it. Here we go. Give us 1 second.
Congresswoman Omar, can I get your reaction to the shooting that happened in D.C. last night?
I'm going to go for now. I'm going to go for now, Mark. Couldn't even say condolences for the family.
Yeah.
Treason?
It's not treason, but I'd certainly scrutinize that person. Like, what's going on here? What else might she be supporting? And could she be involved in some? I mean, we should be looking at people very carefully who are manifesting points of view that could have their foundation in treason. The word treason has sort of been, I don't know. It's like we don't look at it anymore as that. It's a real thing, and people that work to undermine this country. By the way, I mean, it was treason to do anything to prevent President Trump, which was the will of the people, to get into office. That's treason, and we should call it out for what it is.
Indeed, we should. All right, we've got one more segment for you. Dr. Drew does not need Blue Chew. He also doesn't need wrinkle filler, but you might. So take a look.
We've been told for years that wrinkle creams are the key to looking younger. But according to Dr. John Lake, a world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, that's just outdated advice. Most wrinkle products are just glorified moisturizers, Dr. Lake says. They barely make a difference, and some can even harm your skin. That's why Dr. Lake has stepped away from conventional cosmetic practices to focus on a breakthrough anti-aging method some are calling a game changer. It's like Photoshop for your face, he says. You might be shocked how easily this can erase visible wrinkles in under 2 minutes. His clients call it the Age Rewinder method, and results have been stunning, taking years, even decades off their appearance. To share it with the public, Dr. Lake released a free step-by-step video showing exactly how to use the method at home. It's already gone viral with over 2.3 million views and glowing feedback from thousands of women. One viewer wrote, "I can't believe how well this works. Best results I've ever had. I'll never stop using it." You can watch the video now at bhmd1.com/Rubin or by clicking the link in the description box below.
All right, one more story for you. This is connected to the mass brainwashing, or you mentioned mass formation psychosis, that I think it was Dr. Robert Malone on Rogan that really got that phrase to kind of popularize. Right. But listen to this from Charlie Kirk.
Wow. Came up with that frame.
Yeah. Listen to this from Charlie Kirk. Wow, this DHS letter from Kirsty Noem to Harvard is pretty extraordinary. Not only does it prohibit Harvard from enrolling foreign students moving forward, any currently enrolled foreigners will have to transfer to other universities to maintain their status. The this decertification also means that existing aliens on F or J non-immigrant status must transfer to another university in order to maintain their non-immigrant status. Noem's letter claims that Harvard has refused to comply with multiple DHS requests for information about its foreign student populations, harassment of Jewish students, as well as its DEI initiatives. They have 72 hours to comply or the prohibition will remain. This would basically be a death penalty for Harvard as a top global academic institution. Drew, broadly on this, before we get to the specifics, I am fairly certain that if an American student of any color, ethnicity, skin color, sexuality, genitals, blah, 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 went to literally any other country on earth and started harassing students there, or not letting them on campus, or calling for genocide, or, I don't know, locking Hispanic janitors in the building, which is what they did at Columbia, that they would be kicked out immediately. So I have literally zero problem with any of this.
That's exactly what I was talking about a few minutes ago, which is that these institutions that live in a world of zero gravity need to join the rest of us in the marketplace And these will help market forces come to bear. Bill Ackman, I just noticed while we were on, put a thread up about Harvard's financial situation, and it sounds rather grim. So they will quickly have to come to terms with this. And they should. They should be forced to join the rest of us and not be at their liberty to exist in a world that doesn't have gravity, doesn't have markets, doesn't have any consequence whatsoever. They need to be in the world with the rest of us. You know, I was just thinking before we addressed this topic was this notion of treason. I guess we're treasonous as domestic terrorists, right? So treason will could get spread around, but
treason ain't what it used to be. Our treason is telling people make some choices for yourself. Their treason.
It's crazy, but it really does bring into focus how important it is that we understand what happened in the White House during the Biden administration. Because if we're going to start looking at things like treason, if we're going to start looking at things like consequences of free speech, we got to be sure that people making these decisions are not holding their finger on the scale in some sort of egregious way as they did in the Biden administration.
Drew, as always, you are the best. And I should note, I mention it every now and again, but the first television show that I ever did was Dr. Drew on HLN first network television, probably back in, could be 2013. Were you still on HLN at that time?
Yeah, it's so funny. I'd forgotten about that. But we invented a lot of people. Kayleigh McEnany, Tommy Lehrman. These were all people we were putting on the air because they thought they were interesting. Ben Shapiro, he came on with a transgender woman.
Oh, right, and she choked him, or he choked him.
I know who Ben Shapiro was, and she still accuses me of setting her up and being a bad person. I didn't know what was going to happen.
You know what? Next week I'm going to play that clip because there's this incredible clip. Maybe we could find it real quick. Can we find it real quick? Well, we're going to drag this out for a moment, Drew. But basically, you have it was a man who had transitioned to woman. Is that right?
Zeri, who was we were trying to be sort of evaluative and sympathetic to the transgender experience. We were trying to understand it. And Zoe was somebody who contributed regularly for us. She was originally Bob Tour, the helicopter pilot of both the Bronco chase and the and the Reginald Denny beating during the riots. He was the helicopter pilot who then transitioned to Zoe. And we valued her, we appreciated her. And this was a large panel. There was about 4 or 5 people on the panel. This guy named Ben Shapiro was in the panel, and he was obnoxious to Zoe. I don't know if you have the footage.
We're trying to grab it right now. Yeah. But it's a rather extraordinary moment because it was also very early on in all of this, and then he in essence grabs Ben while Ben's talking, regardless of whether Ben was being rude or not. And it was early on. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that in one second. But in any event, you were the first guy that ever put me on television. And what I always tell you that I always found so funny is we all exist in these little digital boxes right now. But on your show back then, you would all show up to the studio in LA. And you'd be in the same room, and then they'd say, "Okay, we're going to do the show," and then you'd go into different rooms, and they'd put you in the boxes, which
we kind of invented that. We invented that. We discovered, and CNN followed us because my producer at the time, Bert Dubrow, who also, by the way, invented Sally Jesse.
Yeah, no, he was a legendary TV producer.
But we realized that there's something very powerful about people having a conversation looking out towards the audience. That's a very powerful position. And so whenever people doing podcasts go, "Oh, we need you in the studio," I go, You don't. You can do it by Zoom. You can get more interesting people, and it'll be a more powerful interview. People don't have faith.
All of this is your fault. We used to look at each other, shake each other's hands. It's all Dr. Drew's fault.
Come on
trying to grab. All right, they're in the process of downloading the clip. Drew, what are you doing this weekend while we string out here for another minute?
Going to see my granddaughter in Irvine, California, and that'll be fun. And I want to say, you mentioned, I wanted really quickly, for me, the wellness company is something I'm very involved with. I'm actually the chief patient officer there, and I had to miss their medical board meeting this morning to do the Great Dave Rubin Show, which I'm delighted to do. And just the idea that I contributed to Dave Rubin, and I'm very serious. We need to come up with a verb for the transition, the awakening, Rubinized or something.
Rubinized. You've been Rubinized. That's what they used to say about me in college. All right, we have the video. Here we go.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion. And said if.
So
And he
basically,
went-
okay, so that was a short version of it, but he was basically.
That's the crisis. But Ben was going, sir. He kept interrupting her that way. And she goes, you stop that. And Ben went to the Hollywood PD, which was right down the street, and filed an assault charge, which I thought was a little bit excessive.
We were all kids. Look what we've lived through. I know. Drew, it's been a pleasure as always. A man who does not need Blue Chew nor wrinkle cream. You are welcome back on the show anytime. Good to see you, my man.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Post-game show, 30 seconds, RubinReport.locals.com.